All right, so today's webinar, Email 101, a few little things at the beginning here that I just want to go over. Our next webinar is next Thursday at 2 p.m., and that's going to be Email 102, which means it's going to still be basic email, but it's going to be a little more advanced than today and build on today's. If you want to register for that, just go to 4kcc.com/webinars. If you're on the Treasure Coast, our next seminar is in 10 days on November 10th. It's called Chris Columbus is Home Alone, and it'll be from 10 to 12. It's still $8 a person, and of course we'll have drinks and some things to snack on, etc. So if you're on the Treasure Coast, we hope you'll join us. I'd like to emphasize our blog, 4kcc.com/blog. You can see the recent posts, of course, the ones about Email 101, which is this webinar, and Email 102, computer user basic skill. Yesterday was, or Monday was Have Internet Day, and some others. So we hope that you'll go there. You can sign up if you want to get an email every time we post a blog. Generally, I do them Monday through Saturday. Sometimes I have to do, like yesterday, I wasn't able to do one, so I did 2 today to catch up. But I hope you'll find them interesting. They're usually about a 3 to 4 minute read. All right, so in today's webinar, what we're going to do is we're really going to look at some basic stuff when it comes to email. And some of the things you might want to think right off the bat, or your reaction might be, oh gosh, I already know that. And that's fine. If I go over things that you do know, that's great. But this is a very good review for you on this one. But I think I'm going to present some things that I bet you don't know, even if you've been using email for years and years. So we're going to get started. We're starting with an email address, and I'm using my own, john@4kcc.com. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at that email address and see how it's broken down. The first part is that the John, that is the username portion of the email address. And that is a place where capitalization doesn't matter. There's a lot of times people will capitalize, and I'm giving you an example on this line here. I'm showing you 4 different ways to type the name John as the username. But the truth is, it makes no difference. Any way I capitalize it or don't capitalize it, it's still going to get to me if the rest of the email address is correct. So sometimes people like to capitalize because they think it looks nicer, or if they're going to use it for publicity, like on a business card or something like that, it may look nicer, but it makes absolutely no difference when you send the email. Because sometimes people come into remote and they want to put an email address in and they'll say, should I capitalize this? Capitalization does not matter when it comes to the username. Now, here's a part that you may not know. The username may include, of course, numbers, periods, and the symbols that you see on the screen. You probably don't know that you can put these symbols in a lot of email addresses, and of course letters. But the thing about it is most of these symbols are very rare, except for the period and the underscore, which we're going to look at a little bit more. But if you see an email with those, just know that they're allowed, because the reason I brought that up is that sometimes we get emails that we think might be from a hacker or something bad. And they'll have some of these symbols in the email address, and we'll immediately rule out the email and think it's junk because it has one of these symbols. But the truth is, all the symbols you see on the screen, they are allowed in email addresses as far as the overall rules for email addresses. Okay, so now, we'll continue on. The next thing we look at is the @ symbol. And that must be in every email address. If you don't have an @ symbol, it's not going to go out as an email. And the @ symbol is immediately after the username. Now, the username can be long sometimes and complicated, but the @ symbol goes right after the username. Again, if you forget the @ symbol, the email is not going to go out because it's not addressed properly. I don't know about you, but sometimes I will make a mistake when I'm typing, and when I go to capitalize the number 2, which gives me the @ symbol, I'll miss the caps, and a 2 will go in there, and then when I look up, it won't let me send the email because there's no @ symbol. So you have to make sure that you have that. The next part of an email address is, in this case, it's the 4KCC, and that's what we call the domain. The domain name, another place where capitalization does not count. So here I'm giving you 4 examples, the lowercase one, all upper, and then all the different ways that you can do it. And it doesn't matter how I type it. The email server is only going to see lowercase 4KCC. Okay, it doesn't care about the other things. And the domain, it can include letters, numbers, and a hyphen. That's it. No blank spaces are allowed in a domain. Of course, generally, you are not creating the domain. You are simply sending to a particular domain, like 4kcc.com. But you should know that only letters, numbers, and a hyphen can be in a domain name. And you might say, okay, what is a domain? And I put a little definition there for you. But basically, it's a subset on the internet, and it addresses a certain area. And when I'm all done here, I'm going to give you what I think is a real-life example for you. All right, and then the last part of the email address is what we call, in this case it's .com, it's what we call the top level domain. And in the top level domain, that is, first of all, capitalization again doesn't count, so I could write the com any way you see here. The other thing is that the top level domain must start with a period. All right, so you have .com, .net, .org, .edu, .ca, all kinds of domain, top-level domains, but they have to start with a period. Now, email addresses cannot contain spaces unless they're used inside quotes. Now, I bet you that's something you didn't know. And here's an example. This first email address I have would not be sent out because I have J space OH. Okay, it's not going to go. It doesn't matter about the N. The space is what makes it go, or not go, rather. All right, but here's an example of where you actually could get an email to go. You notice that I've put John with a space in quotation marks. And that is actually a legitimate email address, and it could go out, even though it has a space, but it's because it's inside of quotes. Now, here's the thing. Most email services will not allow you to use quotes. So I'm going to give you an example here. I went to Yahoo, and I tried to create a new account with the quote J space OHN quote at yahoo.com. Now, as far as the standard goes, quotes are allowed in the username of an email address, but Yahoo will not allow it. You see, it says you can only use letters, numbers, periods, and underscores. So that's what I said a little bit earlier. The period and the underscore are the most common. So Yahoo would not allow me to create this account with quotes in the username. So I said, okay, let me go to Google and try to do the same thing in Google. And what happened in Google is they also would not allow it. And look how more restricted Google is. Sorry, only letters, numbers, and periods are allowed. So at Gmail, I can't even use an underscore. All right, I can only use a period and letters and numbers. So then I thought, all right, let me try one more. Let me go to Microsoft and see if I can create a username with quotes at Microsoft? And the answer was no. When I tried to do it, they didn't tell me why it was not acceptable, but they're asking me to enter an email format in, and they won't accept the quotes. So now I've showed you 3 places that don't accept all those symbols I showed you earlier, and they don't accept quotes. So you might be asking me, why did I bother to show you that? The reason I showed you that is these free services, most of them do not allow it, but certain servers could. For instance, 4kcc.com. All right, our password or our email accounts allow some of these symbols, not all of them, but they allow some of them. So I could create an email address at 4kcc and use some of these symbols. If I send it to you, I want you to recognize that it could be legitimate. All right, it may not be bad just because it has one of these symbols. But most of the free services, Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft, almost all of the free services will not allow you to use anything except a period and maybe an underscore. But I just wanted you to be aware that, you know, an email address could have these symbols or even the quotes and be legitimate. All right, the next thing on email we want to talk about is passwords. This is an area that's always fun. Here's something, I want to give you a very profound statement. All email accounts have passwords. Let me say that again. All email accounts have passwords. And the reason I say that is here's what happens. It just happened about 2 weeks ago. I sold a customer a new computer. I set it up like I normally do. I was in their home and we went to set up their email and I said, "What's your email password?" And they said, "Oh, I don't have a password." And I had to very gently say, "Yes, you do have a password." What happens a lot of times is we put a password in, like when this person got their computer 5 years ago, they probably put the password in, haven't changed the password since they put it in the machine, and they had a check mark so that they don't have to put the password in. The machine remembers the password. So in their mind, they think that they don't have a password. But all email accounts have passwords, and you should know it. You should know what your password is. There are no set rules, like general global rules about passwords. Every email company creates their own password rules. Some have requirements like they must be 8 characters. You must have a capital letter, you must have a lowercase letter, you must have a number, and some even say you must have a symbol. And then they limit what symbols you can have. All right, so I can't give you rules on that. It all depends on where your email is. And some will make you change your password every so often. But they set the rules, whoever is doing, providing the email to you. All right, the next thing about passwords that I want to mention that's important, your email password should be your second or third most secure password, and it should not be used anywhere else. Now, first of all, you might say, well, why shouldn't it be my most secure? And that's because if you use an email, if you use a password organizer like we use RoboForm, your strongest password should be protecting RoboForm because it's protecting all of your other passwords. The reason that you don't want to use, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, they use the easiest, simplest password they can get away with on email. And that is a major mistake because hackers can easily break your password. They can get into your account. They can steal your address book. In some cases, I've seen hackers go into email accounts and not only steal the address book, but delete it so you don't have it anymore. I've seen them go in and delete all the folders you might have with emails in, and all the emails that you have. And I've seen them go in and change your security questions or your security phone number. So you do not want to give them an easy password that they can break. Your password should follow the rules that, that we use, which are the same rules that the FBI teaches. And that's never use a full word in your password, and use a phrase, and use numbers. And, we have a whole other set on that. I'm not going to go into that in this webinar. But the main thing is you want to have a secure password, because keep this in mind. If they can break into your email account, they can almost always get hints about where you bank, where you do other financial transactions, your schedule. Maybe they can find out that you're going away on a 2-week trip and no one's going to be home. And there's all kinds of things they can do. So if you have an easy password on your email, please go change it today. Don't wait. All right, now let's talk about addressing an email, because this is an issue that we have problems with, people don't understand. And so on the screen, you see that I have an example of an email up, and it has 3 fields where you can put an address: the to field, the CC, and the BCC field. So first we're going to look at the to field, and you can see that when you are sending to one person, okay, or if you're sending to multiple people who all know each other's email address, you can put those emails in the to field. So for instance, if you were sending to your family and everyone in your family knows everyone else's email address, you could use the to field if you wanted to. All right. And so that's what goes in there, either to one person or to multiple people who know each other's email address. Now, right under the to, in most cases, is the CC, which stands for carbon copy. And of course, that goes back to the old days when we had a typewriter and we used to put carbon in between papers and we'd make a carbon copy. Sometimes we make multiple carbon copies. You should use the carbon copy when you are going to mention someone in the email, even though the email is not directly to that person. So for instance, I do this often, like I'll send an email out where Joyce had mentioned something to me, and in the email, I will mention Joyce's name. The email is not to Joyce, but I'm mentioning her name. So as a courtesy, I will put her in the CC field so that she gets a copy and she can see that I have spoken to someone and I've dropped her name. So she can figure out how she's going to defend herself if I've said something I shouldn't have. But anyway, it's always a good idea, if you mention someone, CC them. And then the next field is the BCC, which stands for blind carbon copy. And again, this goes back to the old typewriter days. And this would be when you'd make a carbon copy, but on the original, you would not mention that you had sent a copy to someone else. Lawyers were great users of this, law firms. And the idea is that if you put something in BCC, no one can see any of those addresses in the BCC. Now, if you put someone in the to and or the CC and the BCC, everyone in the BCC will be able to see the addresses in the to and the carbon copy. However, the people in the to and the CC will not be able to see the people in the BCC, and the other people in the BCC won't be able to see each other's. All right, now, why do I stress this? Let me give you a great example. One day, one of my customers sent out an email to everyone in their address book, including me. Well, suddenly I was getting 3 or 4 jokes from an AOL email address that I had no clue who the person was. So what happened was my customer sent out all these email addresses, and one of their friends decided that I should be on their email list. Now I get about 400 emails a day. I have zero time to read 3 or 4 jokes a day from the same person. So I had to block that AOL address. So that's why you don't want to share addresses to people that don't know each other. That's why I said originally in the to field, you can share if everybody knows each other's email address. But if they don't, you should be using BCC. And I can't preach that enough. Now, one of the things that people will say to me, they'll say, well, John, in my email, there is no BCC or CC. There's only the to box. All right, so what I've done is I've gone to my Comcast account so that I can show you that Comcast and Yahoo and AT&T and all those others, they all have CC and BCC. In this case, it's over on the right-hand side. And what you do is you click on either the CC or the BCC, or in my case, I clicked on both of them. And then what happened was I got all the fields over on the left where I can put names in. Every email service gives you the ability to carbon copy and blind carbon copy. So even if you think it's not there, it is. You might have to search a little bit to find it, but it is there. So be sure to use those, carbon copy and blind carbon copy, the way I have explained. Now, the last thing on addressing an email is the subject line. Here are some rules. Always include a subject. Why? Because hackers often, or spammers, I should say, often do not. And then they want to make you curious so that you'll open the email because there's no subject. So what happens is spam software will often just filter out an email that doesn't have a subject. So if you don't put a subject in it, it may get filtered out and the person may never receive it. When you do put a subject, include something in the subject that will help the recipient know its importance. I just mentioned, I get about 400 business emails a day. That's not even counting my personal ones. All right, so if you're just sending me an email, general information, something that's not really important, you might want to put in the subject, when you have time to look at this. And then I know I can go back and look at it later. If it's important, then you should maybe mark it, this is important, or I need an answer, or something like that. So in the subject, make sure that you are doing that. First of all, putting the subject, and then helping the person that's getting the email know how quickly they should look at it. Addressing a forward. So someone sends you an email and you want to forward it to someone else. The exact same rules that I just went over apply. If you're forwarding an email, you're going to do the same thing in the carbon copy, and the BCC. Exactly the same. All right, now replying to an email. It's a couple things. When you go to reply to an email, there's a reply and a reply all. And sometimes people come in the remote and they don't understand the difference between those two. So I'm going to try to explain that to you. Here is the header of an email that came from our pastor at church. He had sent an email, and if you look at the email, you'll see that it shows his name, Anil Singh, and his email, which I blocked out. And then on the right, it shows everyone he sent it to. All right, if I click on reply, here's what will happen. I click on reply, I give a reply to the email. Only Pastor Anil gets the reply. He's the only one that sees it. That's a reply. Even though the original email was sent to all these other people you see on the right, they don't get to see my reply. All right, so I circled them with red because they don't get to see it. Now, on the other hand, if I click on reply all, Pastor Anil still gets to see that reply, but guess what? So does everyone else that was in the original email. So that is the difference between reply and reply all. And, you know, depending which would you hit, it depends. You know, sometimes I'll get an email with multiple recipients like this one, and I may want to reply individually to the pastor and not to everyone else. So that only he sees the reply and then he can deal with it without everyone else getting involved or being able to voice their opinion on what I said. So that would be the difference between reply and reply all. Of course, if an email was only sent to you from one person, you're only going to have the reply option. There will be no reply all. All right, how you get your email? You use webmail or you use an email client. Okay, that's how you get your email. And what's going to happen now is this is exactly where we're going to start next week in email 102. We're going to talk about how you get your email. We're going to talk about the difference between POP and IMAP email service and a whole bunch more stuff that we're going to do. So we're going to stop right here. Joyce, do we have any questions? No questions. Okay, very good. So that's it for today. I hope you'll go sign up for next week because we're going to pick up right here and you're going to learn a whole bunch more stuff. I hope you learned some things today. Thank you and have a great day.